Hello, this is Morale Bernard with the continuation of the story, Secret Adversary. And by the way, before I begin, please subscribe to the channel, please, and please share the videos with friends and acquaintances. Thank you very much. Last words were, it is unfortunate that there is no chance of the conditions repeating themselves as you suggest. Not by nature, perhaps, Doc. But I'm talking about art. Art? Why, yes. What's the difficulty? Hire a liner. A liner? Murmured Dr. Hall faintly. Hire some passengers. Hire a submarine. That's the only difficulty, I guess. Governments are apt to be a bit hidebound over their engines of war. They won't sell to the first comer. Still, I guess that can be got over. Ever heard of the word graft, sir? Well, graft get there every time. I reckon that we shan't really need to fire a torpedo. If everyone hustles round and screams loud enough that the ship is sinking, it ought to be enough for an innocent young girl like Jane. By the time she's got a life belt on her and is being hustled into a boat with a well-drilled lot of artists doing the hysterical stunt on deck, why, she ought to be right back where she was in May 1915. How's that for the bare outline? Dr. Hall looked at Julius. Everything that he was for the moment incapable of saying was eloquent in that look. No, said Julius in answer to it. I'm not crazy. The thing's perfectly possible. It's done every day in the States for the movies. Haven't you seen trains in collision on the screen? What's the difference between buying up a train and buying up a liner? Get the properties and you can go right ahead. Dr. Hall found his voice. But the expense, my dear sir. His voice rose. The expense. It will be colossal. Money doesn't worry me any, explained Julius simply. Dr. Hall turned an appealing face to Sir James, who smiled slightly. Mr. Ershmeyer is very well off, very well off indeed. The doctor's glance came back to Julius with a new and subtle quality in it. This was no longer an eccentric young fellow with a habit of falling off trees. The doctor's eyes held the deference according to a really rich man. A very remarkable plan. Very remarkable, he murmured. The move is, of course, your American word for the kima. Very interesting. I fear we are perhaps a little behind the times over here in our methods. And you really mean to carry out this remarkable plan of yours? You bet your bottom dollar I do. The doctor believed him, which was a tribute to his nationality. If an Englishman had suggested such a thing, he would have had grave doubts as to his sanity. I cannot guarantee a cure, he pointed out. Perhaps I ought to make that quite clear. Sure, that's all right, said Julius. You just trot out Jane and leave the rest to me. Jane? Miss Janet Van der Meyer, then. Can we get on the long distance to your place right away and ask them to send her up? Or shall I run down and fetch her in my car? The doctor stared. I beg your pardon, Mr. Hershmeyer. I thought you understood. Understood what? That Miss Van der Meyer is no longer under my care. Julius sprang up. What? I thought you were aware of that. When did she leave? Let me see. Today is Monday, is it not? It must have been last Wednesday. Why, surely, yes. It was the same evening that you, fell out of my tree. That evening, before or after? Let me see. Oh, yes, afterwards. A very urgent message arrived from Mrs. Vandermeyer. The young lady and the nurse who was in charge of her left by the night train. Julius sank back again into his chair. Nurse Edith left with the patient, I remember, he muttered. My God, to have been so near. Dr. Hall looked bewildered. I don't understand. Is the young lady not with her aunt after all? Tuppence shook her head. She was about to speak when a warning glance from Sir James made her hold her tongue. The lawyer rose. I'm much obliged to you, Hall. We're very grateful for all you've told us. I'm afraid we're now in the position of having to track Miss Vandermeyer anew. What about the nurse who accompanied her? I suppose you don't know where she is? The doctor shook his head. We've not heard from her, as it happens. I understood she was to remain with Miss Vandermeyer for a while. But what can have happened? Surely the girl has not been kidnapped. That remains to be seen, said Sir James gravely. The other hesitated. You do not think I ought to go to the police? No. In all probability, the young lady is with other relations. The doctor was not completely satisfied, but he saw that Sir James was determined to say no more and realized that to try and extract more information from the famous K.C. would be mere waste of labour. Accordingly, he wished them goodbye, and they left the hotel. For a few minutes they stood by the car talking. How maddening, cried Tuppence, to think that Julius must have been actually under the same roof with her for a few hours. I was a darn idiot, muttered Julius gloomily. Couldn't have known, Tuppence consoled him. Could he? She appealed to Sir James. I should advise you not to worry, said the latter kindly. No use crying over spilt milk, you know. The great thing is what to do next, added Tuppence, the practical. Sir James shrugged his shoulders. You might advertise for the nurse who accompanied the girl. That is only course I can suggest, and I must confess I do not hope for much result. Otherwise there is nothing to be done. Nothing, said Tuppence blankly. And Tommy? We must hope for the best, said Sir James. Oh yes, we must go on hoping. But over her downcast head his eyes met Julius, and almost imperceptibly he shook his head. Julius understood. The lawyer considered the case hopeless. The young American's face grew grave. Sir James took Tuppence's hand. You must let me know if anything further comes to light. Letters will always be forwarded. Tuppence stared at him blankly. You are going away? I told you, don't you remember, to Scotland. Yes, but I thought... The girl hesitated. Sir James shrugged his shoulders. My dear young lady, I can do nothing more, I fear. Our clues have all ended in thin air. You can take my word for it that there is nothing more to be done. If anything should arise, I shall be glad to advise you in any way I can. His words gave Tuppence an extraordinary, desolate feeling. I suppose you're right, she said. Anyway, thank you very much for trying to help us. Goodbye. Julius was bending over the car. A momentary pity came into Sir James's keen eyes as he gazed into the girl's downcast face. Don't be too disconsolate, Miss Tuppence, he said in a low voice. Remember, holiday time isn't always all playtime. One sometimes manages to put in some work as well. Something in his tone made Tuppence glance up sharply. He shook his head with a smile. No, I shan't say any more. Great mistake to say too much. Remember that. Never tell all you know, not even to the person you know best. Understand? Goodbye. He strode away. Tuppence stared after him. She was beginning to understand Sir James's methods. Once before he had thrown her a hint in the same careless fashion. Was this a hint? What exactly lay behind those last brief words? Did he mean that after all he had not abandoned the case, that secretly he would be working on it still while? Her meditations were interrupted by Julius, who adjured her to get right in. You're looking kind of thoughtful, he remarked as they started off. Did the old guy say anything more? Tuppence opened her mouth impulsively and then shut it again. Sir James's words sounded in her ears. Never tell all you know, not even to the person you know best. And like a flash there came into her mind another memory. Julius, before the safe in the flat. Her own question and the pause before his reply. Nothing. Was there really nothing? Or had he found something he wished to keep to himself? If he could make a reservation, so could she. Nothing particular, she replied. She felt rather, then saw Julius throw a sideways glance at her. Say, shall we go for a spin in the park? If you like. For a while they ran on under the trees in silence. It was a beautiful day. The keen rush through the air brought a new exhilaration to Tuppence. Say, Miss Tuppence, do you think I'm ever going to find Jane? Julius spoke in a discouraged voice. The mood was so alien to him that Tuppence turned and stared at him in surprise. He nodded. That's so. I'm getting down and out over the business. Sir James today hadn't got any hope at all. I could see that. I don't like him. We don't G together somehow. But he's pretty cute, and I guess he wouldn't quit if there was any chance of success, now would he? Tuppence felt rather uncomfortable, but clinging to her belief that Julius also had withheld something from her, she remained firm. He suggested advertising for the nurse, she reminded him. Yes, with a forlorn hope flavour to his voice. No, I'm about fed up. I'm half a mind to go back to the States right away. Oh, no, cried Tuppence. We've got to find Tommy. I sure forgot Beresford, said Julius contritely. That's so. We must find him. But after all, well, I've been daydreaming ever since I started on this trip, and these dreams are rotten, poor business. I'm quit of them. Say, Miss Tuppence, there's something I'd like to ask you. Yes? You and Beresford, what about it? I don't understand, replied Tuppence with dignity, adding rather inconsequently. And anyway, you're wrong. Not got a sort of kindly feeling for one another? Certainly not, said Tuppence with warmth. Tommy and I are friends, nothing more. I guess every pair of lovers has said that some time or another, observed Julius. Nonsense, snapped Tuppence. Do I look the sort of girl that's always falling in love with every man she meets? You do not. You look the sort of girl that's mighty often getting fallen in love with. Oh, said Tuppence, rather taken aback. That's a compliment, I suppose. Sure. Now, let's get down to this. Supposing we never find Beresford and all right, say it. I can face facts. Supposing he's dead, well, and all this business fizzles out, what are you going to do? I don't know, said Tuppence forlornly. You'd be darned lonesome, you poor kid. I shall be all right, snapped Tuppence with her usual resentment of any kind of pity. What about marriage? Inquired Julius. Got any views on the subject? I intend to marry, of course, replied Tuppence. That is, if... She paused, knew a momentary longing to draw back, and then struck on her guns bravely. I can find someone rich enough to make it worth my while. That's frank, isn't it? I dare say you despise me for it. I never despise business instinct, said Julius. What particular figure have you in mind? Figure? Asked Tuppence, puzzled. Do you mean tall or short? No, sum, income. Oh, I haven't quite worked that out. What about me? You? Sure thing. Oh, I couldn't. Why not? I tell you I couldn't. Again, why not? It would seem so unfair. I don't see anything unfair about it. I call your bluff, that's all. I admire you immensely, Miss Tuppence, more than any girl I've ever met. You're so darn plucky. I'd just love to give you a real rattling good time. Say the word and we'll run round right our way to some high-class jeweller and fix up the ring business. I can't, gasped Tuppence. Because of Beresford? No. Well then? Tuppence merely continued to shake her head violently. You can't reasonable expect more dollars than I've got. Oh, it isn't that, gasped Tuppence with an almost hysterical laugh. But thanking you very much and all that, I think I'd better say no. I'd be obliged if you do me the favour to think it over until tomorrow. It's no use. Still, I guess we leave it like that. Very well, said Tuppence meekly. Neither of them spoke again until they reached the Ritz. Tuppence went upstairs to her room. She felt morally battered to the ground after her conflict with Julia's vigorous personality. Sitting down in front of the glass, she stared at her own reflection for some minutes. Fool, murmured Tuppence at length, making a grimace. Little fool, everything you want, everything you've ever hoped for, and you go and bleed out no like an idiotic little sheep. It's your one chance. Why don't you take it? Grab it. Snatch at it. What more do you want? As if in answer to her own question, her eyes fell on a small snapshot of Tommy that stood on her dressing table in a shabby frame. For a moment she struggled for self-control, and then, abandoning all presence, she held it to her lips and burst into a fit of sobbing. Oh, Tommy, Tommy, she cried, I do love you so, and I may never see you again. At the end of 5 minutes, Tuppence sat up, blew her nose and pushed back her hair. That's that, she observed sternly. Let's look facts in the face. I seem to have fallen in love with an idiot of a boy who probably doesn't care 2 straws about me. Here she paused. Anyway, She resumed as though arguing with an unseen opponent. I don't know what he does. He'd never have dared to say so. I've always jumped on sentiment, and here I am being more sentimental than anybody. What idiots girls are. I've always thought so. I suppose I shall sleep with his photograph under my pillow and dream about him all night. It's dreadful to feel you've been false to your own principles. Tuppence shook her head sadly as she reviewed her backsliding. I don't know what to say to Julius, I'm sure. Oh, what a fool I feel. I'll have to say something. He's so American and thorough. He'll insist upon having a reason. I wonder if he did find anything in that safe. Tuppence's meditations went off on another track. She reviewed the events of last night carefully and persistently. Somehow they seemed bound up with Sir James's enigmatical words. Suddenly she gave a great start. The colour faded out of her face. Her eyes, fascinated, gazed in front of her. The pupils dilated. Impossible, she murmured. Impossible. I must be going mad even to think of such a thing. Monstrous. Yet it explained everything. After a moment's reflection, she sat down and wrote a note, weighing each word as she did so. Finally, she nodded her head as though satisfied, and slipped it into an envelope which she addressed to Julius. She went down the passage to his sitting room and knocked at the door. As she had expected, the room was empty. She left the note on the table. A small page boy was waiting outside her own door when she returned to it. Telegram for you, miss. Tuppence took it from the salver and tore it open carelessly. Then she gave a cry. The telegram was from Tommy. From a darkness, punctuated with throbbing stabs on fire, Tommy dragged his senses slowly back to life. When he at last opened his eyes, he was conscious of nothing but an excruciating pain through his temples. He was vaguely aware of unfamiliar surroundings. Where was he? What had happened? He blinked feebly. This was not his bedroom at the Ritz, and what the devil was the matter with his head? Damn, said Tommy, and tried to sit up. He had remembered. He was in that sinister house in Soho. He uttered a groan and fell back. Through his almost closed lids he recontured Grace carefully. He's coming to, remarked a voice very near Tommy's ear. He recognized it at once for that of the bearded and efficient German, and lay artistically inert. He felt that it would be a pity to come round too soon, and until the pain in his head became a little less acute, he felt quite incapable of collecting his wits. Painfully he tried to puzzle out what had happened. Obviously somebody must have crept up behind him as he listened and struck him down with a blow on the head. They knew him now for a spy, and would in all probability give him short shrift. Undoubtedly he was in a tight place. Nobody knew where he was. Therefore he need expect no outside assistance and must depend solely on his own wits. Well, here goes, murmured Tommy to himself, and repeated his former remark. Down, he observed, and this time succeeded in sitting up. In a minute the German stepped forward and placed the glass to his lips with a brief command. Drink. Tommy obeyed. The potency of the draught made him choke, but it cleared his brain in a marvellous manner. He was lying on a couch in the room in which the meeting had been held. On one side of him was the German, on the other the villainous-faced doorkeeper who had let him in. The others were grouped together at a little distance away, but Tommy missed one face. The man known as Number One was no longer of the company. "Feel better?" asked the German as he removed the empty glass. "Yes, thanks," returned Tommy cheerfully. "Ah, my young friend, it is lucky for you your skull is so thick." The good Conrad struck hard. He indicated the evil-faced doorkeeper by a nod. The man grinned. Tommy twisted his head round with an effort. "Oh," he said, "so you're Conrad, are you? It strikes me the thickness of my skull was lucky for you too. When I look at you, I feel it's almost a pity I've enabled you to cheat the hangman." The man snarled, and the bearded man said quietly, "He would have run no risk of that." "Just as you like," replied Tommy. "I know it's the fashion to run down the police. I'd rather believe in them myself." His manner was nonchalant to the last degree. Tommy Beresford was one of those young Englishmen not distinguished by any special intellectual ability, but who are emphatically at their best in what is known as a tight place. Their natural diffidence and caution fall from them like a glove. Tommy realized perfectly that in his own wits lay the only chance of escape, and behind his casual manner, he was racking his brains furiously. The cold accents of the German took up the conversation. "Have you anything to say before you are put to death as a spy?" "Simply lots of things," replied Tommy, with the same urbanity as before. "Do you deny that you were listening at that door?" "I do not. I must really apologize, but your conversation was so interesting that it overcame my scruples." "How did you get in?" "Oh, dear old Conrad here." Tommy spied or smiled depreciatingly at him. "I hesitate to suggest pensioning off a faithful servant, but you really ought to have a better watchdog." Conrad snarled impotently and said suddenly as the man with the beard swung round upon him, "He gave the word. How was I to know?" "Yes," Tommy chimed in. How was he to know? Don't blame the poor fellow. His hasty action has given me the pleasure of seeing you all face to face." He fancied that his words caused some discomfiture among the group, but the watchful German stilled it with a wave of his hand. "Dead men tell no tales," he said evenly. "Ah," said Tommy, "but I'm not dead yet." "You soon will be, my young friend," said the German. An assenting murmur came from the others. Tommy's heart beat faster, but his casual pleasantness did not waver. "I think not," he said firmly. "I should have a great objection to dine." He had got them puzzled. He saw that by the look of his captor's face. "Can you give us any reason why we should not put you to death?" asked the German. "Several," replied Tommy. "Look here. You've been asking me a lot of questions. Let me ask you one for a change. Why didn't you kill me off at once before I regained consciousness?" The German hesitated, and Tommy seized his advantage. "Because you didn't know how much I knew, and where I obtained that knowledge. If you kill me now, you'll never know." But here the emotions of Boris became too much for him. He stepped forward, waving his arms. "You hellhound of a spy," he screamed. "We will give you short shrift. Kill him! Kill him!" There was a roar of applause. "You hear?" said the German, his eyes on Tommy. "What have you to say to that?" "Say?" Tommy shrugged his shoulders. Pack of fools. Let them ask themselves a few questions. How did I get into this place? Remember what dear old Conrad said? With your own password, wasn't it? How did I get hold of that? I don't suppose I came up those steps haphazard and said the first thing that came into my head. Tommy was pleased with the concluding words of his speech. His only regret was that Tuppence was not present to appreciate its full flavour. That is true, said the working man suddenly. Comrades, we have been betrayed. An ugly murmur rose. Tommy smiled at them encouragingly. That's better. How can you hope to make a success of any job if you don't use your brains? You will tell us who has betrayed you, said the German. But that shall not save you. Oh no. You shall tell us all that you know. Boris here knows pretty ways of making people speak. Bah, said Tommy scornfully, fighting down a singularly unpleasant feeling in the pit of his stomach. You will neither torture me nor kill me. And why not? Asked Boris. Because you'd kill the goose that lays the golden eggs, replied Tommy quietly. Join me for the next video of Secret Adversaries. Find out what's happening here with Tommy. Join me, Morel Bernard, for the next episode, the next video of Secret Adversary. See you in the next video. Bye.